right, so I made the top 10 assault weapons video a long time ago, and I always thought that would be a good series for all the ranged weapons to get a top 10 list, and I just... It didn't follow it up. I don't know why either. It became one of the top performing videos on my entire channel. You guys really enjoyed it, and I just didn't make a follow-up. So here I am with the top 10 SMGs. And before we get into it, I want this to be well known that this is a very information-based list. I wanted this to be all math-driven. However, total damage output and just DPS alone isn't always the only story. So as scientific as I wanted this list to be, there are a few opinion picks in it, and it's also important to note that a lot of weapons behave differently. So there are weapons like, I'll tell you right now, the lightning pistol is one of, it looks like it is, I know, I'll just show the math. This is kind of a lot of the math that went into this video. If I could switch to monitor capture here. This is, you know, if you just want numbers, you can watch this and leave, but this is some of the math that went into this video. I used our DPS calculator. I'll link the video on that down below. But the lightning pistol ranks very, very highly. However, being locked to nature means it's only doing that amount of damage to water enemies. And for some of you, like myself even, I have multiple copies of every weapon. You can see it over here. I have lots of different copies. So whenever I'm just using a nature weapon, or if I'm going into a water mission, I'll just use the lightning pistol. And then it doesn't matter what the debuff is. However, there are also considerations, like it also uses energy cells, and I can't know how much stuff you guys have in your inventory, so there are practical reasons for some weapons, like the lightning pistol or the blaster mini, to be ranked lower than a top tier position because of, well, stuff that I'm going to explain now. So let's just get straight into the list, starting with an honorable mention. The Monsoon, in all even scenarios, is actually the highest DPS SMG in the game, kind of. Unfortunately, I am not able to factor in the spin-up time, so there is a brief period every time you switch this weapon or have to reload it to where you're not actually going to be doing that max damage, and keeping that spin going means you have to have continuous fire. However, once you get going, this thing is literally a pocket minigun. This is a very, very fun weapon to use. It's highly recommended, but because it's so quirky, I felt like it didn't really deserve a spot on the proper top 10 list, but I still felt like it needed a mention. Okay, so before the top 10 list even begins, I want to make a note that the Blastertron Mini, after reviewing the gameplay and after editing almost the entire video, does sort of perform a little bit better than I thought compared to the weapons that are going to follow in a second. I don't want to spoil the list, but because of the way that these weapons perform, I do believe the Blastertron Mini might be a little bit better in the number 8 slot. I'm going to leave it here because the video is almost entirely edited and it's all recorded, and I don't want to redo it because it's not that big of a deal, but I do want to say that the Blastertron Mini in number 10 slot isn't my 100% locked in opinion, but for the sake of this video, I'm just going to let it play out. Now, starting the actual top 10 list with the number 10 position is the Blastatron Mini, and that's the one that I mentioned earlier, where damage-wise, it is almost at the top of the list, but for similar reasons to the Scourge versus the Nocturno video, where the Scourge had a little bit of a problem going on, the Blastatron is locked to energy, meaning all of that damage is kind of meaningless, considering a majority of your enemies will be nature in the endgame, and that's what I'm looking at here, and there is a certain situation where, okay, you will be doing about 11% more than all the other SMGs with all even perks against maybe mist monsters like Zappy Faces, the Takers, you know, some Smashers, some mini bosses, but you can kind of see where I'm going with this. There are elemental smashers in this game. They are hard to kill and they do matter. If anything, they may be your priority target when defending a mission. And against a mini boss as well, and fatties with elements, the Blastatron Mini will just be doing 25% less than it should be more often than not. It's still on the list because it's a fantastic, well-rounded weapon, slow fire rate, high damage per bullet, so even though it's energy, you're not going to be burning through ammo like a normal energy weapon. It's a really, really good pick, but I think it's a good position to be in our number 10 slot. Number 9 is going to be a surprising pick to even myself, the Viper. Now, the Viper, I feel like requires some explanation because I dogged on this weapon for a long, long time, but if you take a look at the math here, it is actually the same DPS as the Thrasher. Let me explain what's going on. So I am factoring in other situations other than just damage because of what you're about to see. The Viper has way less damage than the Thrasher, but a much higher fire rate and a much quicker reload and a much higher mag size. So what this means is it's not really doing more damage per bullet. It's not necessarily a stronger weapon. It just burns through your ammo faster and reloads quick enough to get you right back in the fight before it's a problem. So it's also fairly inaccurate, meaning it has some serious drawbacks, which is why it's number 9, but I can't ignore the fact that if you you don't care about ammo, say you have infinite light ammo and you can get more, this is a really strong weapon. It's a bullet hose. I don't think it earns its damage so much as it just has it, but it's definitely strong, and I feel like it's at least worth mentioning. Another good example is the typewriter, by the way. It's not on this list, but a double fire rate build is actually its highest DPS, but like, come on, you're just burning through ammo. That's how you're getting that damage. It's not real damage. Number 8 on our list is a weapon that I wish was higher. The pepper sprayer has, in all intents and purposes, a perfect setup. It has phenomenal perks. You can have double crit damage, crit rating, damage to afflicted, plus affliction. Affliction is a fantastic 6 perk because I feel like it has built-in area of effect damage. I'm bringing it up now because I know this will be coming up later, but basically with affliction is if you shoot multiple enemies at once, you can actually move on to a bigger, harder to kill target because affliction is so strong in our current version of the game that it'll be ticking away enemies' health and doing lots of damage while it does. And so that means you don't actually need to focus fire any one enemy. You can just sort of ping a bunch of them and then kill the whole crowd at once. So if you use it appropriately, it's actually really, really good. It has a really good 9.9 fire rate. That's nice and average. 34 mag size, which is 4 more than the average of 30. It has a 1.5 reload speed without a reload perk. It has a 4096 range, which is very far for an SMG, and it has the tight bullet spread to account for it. So why is this weapon number 8, Beast? It's the damage. This weapon has absolutely everything going for it, but it doesn't hit that hard. It's so unfortunate. If you have ever used this weapon in the 160s, maybe the gameplay will show it very well, but it just isn't enough. It's great in the lower level missions if you just want something easy that'll pick off zombies. If you're running in the 108s and 124s and you're a max level player, this is a great weapon. If it's the best thing you can find in Ventures, I don't know, but I think number 8 is where it belongs. If it had even a bit of a damage boost, this could easily be the best SMG in our game. It's that good. Number 7 is kind of a cheeky pick, but it's a well-deserved one, and it's the Riptide. Some of you may know that this weapon is a clone of the Thrasher. It's the scavenger variant, but as you can see, the main difference is pretty important, and that is damage. The Thrasher has a base weapon damage of 31, and the Riptide has a base damage of 30. Otherwise, it is effectively identical. It has a lower durability and cheaper crafting cost, so it's a very, very cost-effective weapon. I didn't weight it that hard into my list, but if cost-effectiveness was the only thing I was concerned about, it may be the most bang-for-your-buck SMG on this entire list because it's a scavenger weapon. It's super cheap to operate. It has slightly more impact. If you care about that, it won't matter much, but the Riptide, even with its damage debuff being slightly lower for some reason, it is still coming right behind the Silent Spectre and the Bobcat and the Readius as one of the hardest hitting SMGs in the game, even though it's basically the Thrasher that does less damage. So if that doesn't say how strong the Thrasher is, I don't know what does. Now, here's one of the first controversial picks on this list, and that is the Ratatat being in the number 6 slot. The Ratatat, I've always said, is like a Swiss Army knife of an SMG. Look at the different customizability options this weapon has. You can run triple crit damage if you want to. You can run the typical crit rating double crit damage build like I've got here. You could swap that mag size for a damage perk. You could put damage to afflicted if you want. It has affliction, which as I mentioned is very, very good. It also has stacking crit rating and damage. So what you can do is run that crit rating double crit damage build with stacking damage and you'll be doing tons of damage. The weapons that I have mathed out here basically have the Ratatat doing slightly less than the Bobcat and the Silent Spectre with these exact perks. If you just add the stacking damage to it, it could be even better than both of them. So why isn't it higher? Frankly, it's because I'm mathing out all these weapons with even perks, and that means that the Silent Spectre and the Bobcat both have stacking crit rating. I believe the Bobcat also has stacking damage as well, so that's kind of not really much of an edge for the Ratatat. The Bobcat can't have anything other than extra damage to certain targets, so that 5th perk is wasted if you're not running Affliction, but I think I'm glossing over how good Affliction is. Now, whether or not it's good enough to keep up with a stacking damage perk, that depends on the situation, and this is where it gets muddy, because, like I mentioned, Affliction can be used for kind of a built-in area of effect damage, but what also is happening is the stacking damage only kicks in as you're shooting, so you're really only getting this extra damage or crit rating if you are continually firing, and that isn't really always the case, and being locked into that makes this weapon pretty tough to use. If you're laying into a mini-boss, the Ratatat with a stacking damage perk could actually be one of your best picks. And on top of the stacking damage, you can run triple crit damage with stacking crit rating. So you can even skip out on a crit rating perk, But again, you're starting from 0 every single time, and it's not really a bonus that's always there. Affliction is, after that first bullet, you're just kicked right in. It's actually kind of funny to math out Affliction because technically you're never truly getting a flat 45% bonus, but if you take out that first bullet, every shot after that is gravy, and it's a really, really nice consistent bonus. Of course, the red attack can have that as well, but I think because of the way that I did the math, it comes in just below Silent Spectre, Bobcat, and beyond, and I think number 6 is where it belongs. Oh, hey, the Silent Spectre. I was just talking about you. The number 5 slot. This one surprised me. I always thought the Silent Spectre did more damage than the Bobcat. It does not, actually. But the Silent Spectre makes up for it in a really nice way. It has a higher fire rate than the Bobcat, which I surprisingly didn't know going into this. And because of its massive 48% crit chance, you're essentially critting every other shot. And it makes this weapon high fire rate, lots of crit damage, low base damage. And that's where the Silent Spectre gets evened out. This is a tried and true weapon. I don't think I need to explain it much further. Just basic perks on this. It can be any element. Super solid SMG. It was my favorite for a very, very long time, and I don't think it really needs much more than that. Same story with the Bobcat. The Bobcat has a lot more customizability, but it's a very similar situation where it's just good. It always has been, always will be. It can run triple crit damage. I have a video out on that recently or soon, depending on when I post this video. I'll link to it down below if I can remember to, but it is really, really strong. Pair that with Totally Rocking Out, and you're having a great time. I did all my math without loadouts for today. I'm just going to make that clear. But yeah, the Bobcat can be ran in a lot of different ways. And I want to mention something. Mag size and reload are the same. So on this list, I can actually show the final numbers down here. I did the Bobcat with reload speed and mag size, and the DPS came out to be the same. And that's similar for a lot of weapons in this game, because you're either getting a 75% faster reload speed or a 75% more time shooting. It does work out to be identical, and it's kind of neat. And something interesting I did with this list, as I did not do in the past, is I accounted for reload speed. I probably should have mentioned this sooner, but I think it's clearly labeled that every weapon on this list is factoring the amount of time you spend reloading. So this is more or less actual DPS. For a long, long time, I ranked weapons without factoring in reload, thinking it would be a wash in the end. I don't know why I thought that, and I don't know why I stuck to it for so many years, but it should be kind of noted. Now, there is a little bit of a variance in there where, yes, you are reloading during the fight, but that's only during continuous fire, and the only thing that's going to survive a full mag is usually a smasher or a mini boss. So typically you kill all the things in front of you and then you do the reloading later. So I guess I had that logic going in there for many years, but for this list I did factor in reload, but it doesn't really always matter because whatever you're shooting at is going to be dead by the time you need to reload anyway. So I figured it was worth mentioning, but that's kind of why I did what I did. Number 3, kind of did 4 and 5 together there, huh? Lightning pistol. So I mentioned it wouldn't be in the number 1 spot. I want to make it very clear. This weapon could be. It outdamages the Thrasher. It is outdamaging the 2nd spot on this list. It is a very, very strong weapon, but the lightning pistol being locked to nature means it's very hard to find on my list. Where is my lightning pistol? All right, now that I'm done being blind, the lightning pistol is locked to nature, and that's the one reason it's not higher. The lightning pistol is not only locked to nature, but also takes energy cells, which I know that it might not apply to all of you, but batteries being used to craft your weapon and then fund its ammo, and pair that with a 13.5 fire rate, you will be just burning through energy cells to use this weapon. So there are other weapons in this game that achieve a very similar damage output without draining your resources. If you're rich, unlimited rich, and it doesn't matter, ignore me. Lightning pistol's the best in the game. Go for it. Only if you're running a water mission. You see where it gets even more complicated? So like, I cannot put this weapon in the number 1 spot in a general top 10 list, but it can't be understated how strong this weapon is. I don't really need to go much further into it. There are, I guess, a couple of notes where it does have chain lightning. I don't think that's the best damage output, but the fact that you could run maybe damage to miss monsters and bosses, which, let's be honest, are the only enemies that will actually need any extra damage. I know we have damage to afflicted targets, but most enemies are going to be dead pretty quickly anyway. Chain lightning just allows you to kill more for less ammo, in a way. I guess you're doing less damage to those targets, but hitting more of them with free damage, I don't know. It's a really, really strong weapon, but I just couldn't put it in the number 1 spot. Number 2 on this list is the Hemlock. I think the last few picks are going to be pretty obvious to a lot of you, but the Hemlock is insane. It has every element, a whole host of 6 perks. Look at what we've got going on here. You can regain health, you can snare enemies, which is not that good. Landing 5 hits in a row is the crown one. That is the reason this is in the number 2 spot, because while its damage isn't actually super high compared to some of the other SMGs, it has that explosion that gives you nice area of effect damage, which is extra damage to the enemies around you, and a ton of, well, 14% 100%, but a ton of extra damage to mini bosses and smashers and anything that can survive 5 hits in a row, and it just makes this weapon a super versatile pick. It's got a nice base 15% crit chance, fire rate on here is great, crit damage is great, you can run it in a lot of different ways, and it's just a phenomenal all-around weapon. It's been a classic since it came out, and I stand by that. All right. The number one positions, kind of, is the quick shot and the thrasher. I'm sure I'm surprising nobody here, but let me explain. So I'm going to bring my math back up to defend myself here. The thrasher, as you can tell, is not the highest DPS on this list. But as I've mentioned several times throughout this list, practically speaking, it does higher base damage with a slower fire rate, and 10.8 is not that slow, and it's just a more well-rounded weapon. So like, even though the Viper and the Thrasher have identical DPS, they are 8 spots apart on this list, and I did that by design because the Viper, as I mentioned, is a bullet hose that just chews through your light ammo. The Thrasher actually uses your ammo and actually does good damage, so you can kill so many more enemies before you have to stop to reload. It's a very, very strong pick for that reason, and it's just a great pick. As I mentioned with the stacking crit rating, the Thrasher has it. It doesn't have the stacking damage. That would be very powerful, but it also has the damage to afflicted, which, as I mentioned, is amazing. Its perks are pretty good. Very, very basic, seeing as it is a base game weapon, and it's an old one as well. It is just a fantastic all-around weapon, and while technically speaking, it has the same base stats as the quick shot has 2 more things going for it. First and foremost, it has an extra crit damage perk, meaning you don't need to use affliction on the bottom. You can actually put a proper damage perk, which frees up your 6th perk for the custom one, which is hitting an enemy grants a 1.7% weapon damage increase, and it allows you to reload so fast that you might be able to keep that bonus going indefinitely. You can see that it is number 1 on our list by far in that theoretical perfect situation. However, the only time you'll be doing that much continuous damage is, like I've been mentioning, against a mini boss or a smasher or a huge crowd of enemies. It's not going to be always the best weapon in the game, and like I mentioned, I don't think affliction should be brushed aside so easily. That extra damage in a crowd of enemies is great. So this weapon is lacking multi-target hitting like that. The area of effect damage is a little low on this, but its single target damage is so big that it is just a phenomenal pick. So much so that I would say the quick shot and or the Thrasher are the best SMGs in the entire game. They're basically the same, but not really. It's hard to talk about it, but I also didn't want to put a Founder's Weapon in the number 1 position because I know that weapons that can't be accessed anymore is a little unfair. I don't feel good doing that, so I think it's good to put the Thrasher in those tied. I tried to avoid it on this list, but I think it makes sense. Thank you guys so much for watching. These videos take a ton of work. You know, if you want to use code Mista to support the channel, I really appreciate it. This video got put off for a long time. I had the math finished months ago, and I just never sat down to record it, and I don't really know why. So I hope you guys enjoyed. I'll see you guys in the next one. Comment down below what you guys might want to see, and have a nice day. And then